glory to Jesus Christ, and welcome to this week's episode of God with Us Live. Every week, we're joined by men and women, monastics, clergy, and laity, exploring exciting and inspiring ways to live our Eastern Catholic faith today. Your host is Father Deacon Nick Medelsky, a husband, father, and deacon of the Ukrainian Catholic Eparchy of St. Nicholas. And now, here's Father Deacon Nick.
Hello and welcome once again, God with Us Live listeners. Father Deacon Nick Medelsky, excited as always to be here with you to talk about some wonderful things going on in our Eastern Catholic churches. With the Great Lent approaching, the Great Fast approaching, a lot of us are kind of taking time to take stock of how we're going to live out our Lenten practice this year and kind of focus in on our spirituality and on theosis as we go through this time of preparation for Pascha. Just recently, we spoke with Father James Bankston about a series he's presenting with God with Us online about the Liturgy of the Pre-Sanctified, which, of course, is a big part of the liturgical practice of our journey towards Pascha. But, of course, there's also an element of what we do on our own, what we do outside of the doors of the church as we carry on our daily lives. And, of course, along with fasting and almsgiving, a big part of that, obviously, is prayer. So my guest today is someone who knows a bit about the Jesus prayer, especially, which is one of those prayers that's kind of central to a lot of our spirituality. And so I thought that would be great to have him on to talk about that. But first, we're going to get to know a little bit about himself, before we get into some of the nitty gritty details of spirituality and things like that. So welcome, Father Michael. My guest is Father Michael Bombak, and we'll let him kind of introduce himself because that's better than me just reading off a biography I looked up online. So welcome, Father Michael.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Father Deacon. It's wonderful to be here. It's a real joy, and it's always a real joy to speak about the priesthood and then the Jesus prayer specifically as well. So thank you for the invite.
So obviously you're a priest. You're in the Eparchy of Edmonton. Right?
That's correct, yeah.
And so looking up a little bit, believe it or not, listeners, I do some research before I have guests on the show, and read a little bit of your biography as you became the pastor up there at St. Stephen the Proto-Martyr in Calgary?
Yeah, okay, Calgary, right. Alberta.
And it talked a bit about your journey to the priesthood and how that it looked kind of interesting. So I'm not going to preface it with much. I'm just going to let you kind of tell our listeners a little bit about how you became a priest.
Yeah, well, thank you. I always felt a call that I couldn't really identify, even as a young boy. You know, it's just hard to put into words. But it wasn't until I was serving as an altar boy that I really kind of could put a name to that. I remember serving as an altar boy at St. Nicholas Parish in Edmonton. That's our capital of our province here in Alberta. That's where I was born. And I just remember looking down at my hands and saying, maybe the Lord, wants to use these hands for his ministry as a priest. Like, I just remember that moment fairly vividly. I was in junior high at the time. And I was being fed, it's actually really interesting, I was being fed very much through a Protestant, very fundamentalist, actually, Bible study. I had a good friend in junior high who kind of introduced me in a deeper way to the faith. I've always been a cradle, Ukrainian Catholic, but I just didn't really feel as though I connected as a young, youth, I guess, with my parish. And I was being fed with this fundamentalist Bible study, and it was a lot of fun. We went out. I really learned the scriptures well, but I was really in trouble when I got to university. I was all ready to go to seminary in high school, and my dad said, "You know what, Mike? Become a teacher first. The Lord can always use those gifts that you'll develop as a teacher if you're still called to the priesthood, and if not, then you got a profession to fall back on." So it was really good advice. I didn't like it at the time, let me assure you, but I went for it. I did my undergrad at the U of A. It's it's a big school there in Edmonton. And I wound up really falling away from my faith because I was, sort of inundated by a secularist kind of philosophy. I was in a huge school where I didn't really know anybody, and there wasn't a lot of faith support that way. So my fundamentalist circular, reasoning of it's true because the Bible says that the Bible's true did not stand up to some real criticisms that way. So I started I fell away from my faith for a little while, stopped attending church, and I did eventually wind up coming back, and I started reading. What the catalyst that brought me back was that I had this encounter with the Madonna House Apostolate, which is a group of men, women, and priests who live in community, and they take promises of poverty, chastity, and obedience. And they operate a soup kitchen in Edmonton. And I remember just accepting the invite of basically of a youth director at that time to, go discover who Jesus was by, essentially cleaning toilets and visiting there at the Marion Center at their soup kitchen. So I wound up doing that, and I fell in love. I fell in love with what these people had. I wanted desperately what those people had. Just living saints and people striving for sanctity. You get to see them really actually, living the spiritual life and struggling. And I just really fell in love with that. So that was kind of the catalyst that brought me back. I started reading some good books, some C.S. Lewis and some Chesterton books, and some Christian apologists that could sort of get me out of that that circular logic, and came back stronger. And so that was kind of the initiation of my real sort of faith, of taking my faith seriously on my own. Meanwhile, I had I'd met my wife, I met Kim, we'd wound up having a family. We'd had our first two kids. Our third one was expected on the way. And I started chipping away at the academic sort of requirements for priesthood. I'd made it very clear to Kim, my wife, that, this was on my heart, and she came into the church herself through volunteering at the Marion Center, actually. We all volunteered there together. Yeah, she was baptized Anglican, but, kind of nominally Anglican, yeah. And so she was received into the Ukrainian Catholic Church after sort of seeing that beautiful Madonna House community there. And, we started chipping away. We got a fixed rate mortgage, which was great at the time. But there was one summer where I was doing these courses where, I just clearly heard the Lord say, now is the time to go to seminary. Now is the time to go. And we had decided, no, we're going to make a little bit of a nest egg. We're going to, establish, some financial stability first, all of these things that make a lot of sense. And I just knew in my heart that we had to go now, So I came back from Sheptytsky Institute. That's where those summer classes were taking place in Ottawa at the time. That's where our seminary was at the time. And, we had a big fight and we went, we decided, no, this is the Lord's will. And we broke our fixed mortgage, and we, put my teaching position on hold, and headed out to Ottawa and did seminary there. I was ordained a deacon in my third year of seminary, which was a real joy, and then came back to Edmonton afterwards and did my pastoral internship and was ordained a priest on January 1st, 2016. So that was my journey to the priesthood.
Wow, what a story, especially, kind of falling away a little bit in college, as, a lot of people do, but finding the way back and even bringing your wife into the church. And I read that bit there where you already had, kind of the start of a family, and then in the middle of that, going across the country. For those people who aren't too up on their geography, Ottawa's on the other end of the country of Canada, from Alberta. So that's quite a move there, to
Yes.
attend seminary and everything. So I think that kind of leads naturally into another question I was going to ask. How were you able to kind of balance home life with, preparing for the priesthood and now, of course, being in ministry as a priest? How do you do that? How do you balance that, between having a family and all a young family, and also, preparing for and engaging in ministry? Because I even saw you got back to Edmonton, got ordained, and then your bishop asked you to take even more schooling,
Yeah,
right?
yes, that's right. Yeah, I did wind up doing my master's. Yeah, so how do I do it? I would say badly most of the time. But I'm married to a superhero. That's probably the first piece of the puzzle. So my wife Kim is just phenomenal. Every priest and deacon, I'm pretty sure that subdeacon. I forget if my wife had to write a letter for subdiacon, and I think she did. But whenever a man's ordained to any of the orders, his wife has to write a letter saying that she not only accepts but will support that. And so,
Right.
how that support looks, I think, is as varied as the personalities of priests and their wives are. but but my wife really is supportive. She pours into the family. She is our sacramental coordinator here at the parish, so she's really kind of taken on an assistive role here at St. Stephen's. She's one of the singers, like a cantor here at the parish. So there's a lot of ministry that she does, and she's also, the homemaker of our house. She's present to the kids. So that's number one. Without my wife having the gifts and personality and the
Mm.
willingness that she does, yeah, it would be very different. It would look very different.
Mm.
But the second thing is that you just have to learn how to say the word no, and no one likes doing that.
Nope.
I have this. I have exactly. I have the same sort of conversation with young couples that I prepare for marriage. It's the same thing in any marriage. And they ask me, like, how is it that I'm supposed to maintain this profession that I have and this, my hobbies and all the rest of that stuff, and still, make time for my spouse? And I said, well, you got to learn to say no. You got to learn to say no to good things in order to say yes to the better thing at that moment. So it's difficult. I can't do all the things that I would like to do, or even the things that some people would like me to do, because I've got to have those boundaries, and those boundaries are essential. Without those boundaries, you won't get anything done anyway. So
And
yeah.
that makes a lot of sense, and I'll agree on that front as well. My wife, obviously, without her, I couldn't be in ministry as a deacon. That would not be
Mhm.
possible, right? That the
Yeah.
why our spouses do a lot of heavy lifting in that regard. They're the unsung heroes in a lot of ways, right? Of ministry.
That's right. That's right. I always say that the priests get to wear the cross, but the wives get to carry it. And that's very true for our family. My wife is constantly doing the heavy lifting, like you said.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the other things that you're involved in, and kind of, well, there's two other things you're involved with that kind of are part of the reason I had you on the show. And one of those we'll talk about after the break with the Jesus Prayer 33 challenge, and now the Jesus Prayer 100 challenge, and we'll talk about those after we take a short break here. But before we do, another thing that you've done is really kind of use the internet, right? Social
For
media
sure.
as well as YouTube, and posting your homilies, right? On the musings with Father Mike is up there on YouTube, and some different ways that you've kind of been able to use the internet for evangelization and ministry. How did that kind of start?
Yeah, that's a great question, Father Deacon. I've always felt that at least as Eastern Catholics, we at least now it's getting so much better. I think probably the pandemic kind of worked as a catalyst to kind of expand our digital outreach, but it's always been, in my opinion, kind of underutilized. There isn't a better quicker way to get the kerygma, right? The saving proclamation of our Lord out into the world. In many ways, the internet is, sort of the agora, like the public square, of the world now. And it's a great platform. It can be abused. There are some pitfalls that we could talk about as far as, using the internet for things that, are just less fruitful or inappropriate. But one thing I think in particular that is a really good thing to put on the internet are homilies. I was thinking, I'm preaching this, every Sunday. I'm putting in the effort and the work to hear a word from the Lord and find a way to articulate it to the people in a way that's, please God, helping them in their salvation. Why not, record that? Why not make that available outside the walls of this parish, And, you take a look at the history of the church. Even the catechumens were welcomed and encouraged to hear the homily and the readings before they were kicked out of church, before they saw the mysteries, right? Yeah, and so you take a page out of that historical book that way. The kerygma should be proclaimed far and wide. So it essentially just turned into, well, I just need a camera and I just need to be able to be heard. And that's all that I really need. I'm already doing the hard work of writing the homily. Now I'm just going to capture the homily. And from that, the Lord really has been so generous because volunteers have stepped up now to capture the homily. It's no longer me with my iPhone trying to bumble through it after the fact. We've got cameras here at St. Stephen's as just part of the makeup of the church. And so it really has been blessed that way by the Lord and a real joy. So that's kind of how it started. It was a pre-pandemic decision on my part. I started even in my sort of assistant pastorship at the cathedral when I first came back to Edmonton after seminary. There was just a couple ones on there on musings. But in my previous posting in Lloyd, I sort of decided that I was going to do this on a more, regular basis. And then here in Calgary, the pandemic really kind of made it sort of even more important because people couldn't go to church. They couldn't be in the actual buildings, but they could at least hear, a homily that way. So it was helpful that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, like you said, a lot of the pandemic, there's obviously a lot of, downsides to that, obviously. But there are a lot of, silver linings, right, is the expression that came out of that. And one of those is a lot of the resources now that are available, like liturgical, even something as simple as liturgical booklets of the different services in our church in English are now available online.
That's right.
That weren't before. And a lot of, parishes that are actually streaming liturgy or even posting homilies and things like that. So it's great to have those resources, like you said, and especially, like you mentioned, it's the modern day forum or agora or whatever from ancient times where Paul would, we read in Acts of the Apostles where Paul just kind of sets up his soapbox figuratively in the agora, right, and just starts proclaiming the gospel right there. And so it's not really that much different from that.
That's exactly it. I had a group of Ukrainian Catholics in Bangkok, if you can believe it, contact me. Yeah, I met them through Jesus Prayer 33, but they said that they don't have a priest, and they would serve like a Reader's Typica service on Sunday, and they would listen to the homily. So it's just a wonderful opportunity. So if they're willing to do that, it's so easy to put it up. Like it's worth it.
Right.
So.
Well, that's great, especially to hear that feedback. And as I mentioned, we'll be talking about Jesus Prayer 33 here in a second. If people aren't familiar with that, don't worry. We'll get to it after the break. So stay tuned here on God With Us Live.
Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Scenes with the Saints. Do you know which saint was an undercover missionary bishop? Saint Eusebius grew up in 1st century Rome, the son of wealthy pagan parents. From a young age, he was highly regarded for his intelligence, and his parents wanted him to marry when he came of age. Eusebius felt something calling him elsewhere, though, so he secretly left Rome and sailed to the island of Cyprus. Around the same time, the apostles Barnabas and Mark were arrested for preaching the gospel in Cyprus, with Barnabas being martyred and Mark narrowly escaping the same fate. But before St. Mark left Cyprus, by divine providence, he met, evangelized, and baptized the young Eusebius. Wanting to share the faith he had received, Eusebius was ready to go forth boldly and proclaim Christ to the pagan inhabitants of the nearby city of Soli. But seeing how violently the inhabitants of Cyprus had reacted to his own preaching, St. Mark had another plan. St. Mark ordained Eusebius a bishop, but told him to hide his faith and ministry in public so that he could gradually win the hearts and the citizens of Soli for Christ by preaching to them individually in secret. When Eusebius arrived in Soli, a priest at the temple of Zeus offered him a meal and a place to stay. It wasn't long before Eusebius converted this pagan priest to Christianity, soon to be followed by many more pagans. Remembering his secret mission from St. Mark, though, Eusebius continued pretending to be a good pagan and even lived near the temple of Zeus to keep the inhabitants of Soli from becoming too suspicious. In the meantime, St. Mark arrived in Alexandria, where he proclaimed the gospel and was soon visited by the Apostle Paul. Mark told Paul about St. Barnabas' martyrdom, and so Paul sent 2 young men to the Archbishop of Cyprus, Heraclides, asking him to ordain them and appoint them bishops over the 2 cities of Cyprus. Also, Paul asked Heraclides to find Eusebius and publicly appoint him the Bishop of Soli. Eusebius was overjoyed at the news that he could now proclaim Christ openly. Through the power of God, Eusebius not only boldly proclaimed Christ, but also gained a reputation for healing the sick and casting out demons. He quickly gained many converts to Christianity and built up his eparchy in Cyprus. After 50 years of ministry, St. Eusebius peacefully reposed in the Lord, with his tomb becoming a pilgrimage site for healing and exorcism. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Scenes with the Saints. Join us again next time when we learn more about the lives of these holy men and women.
Welcome back, God with Us Live listeners. Again, Father Deacon Nick here today with Father Michael Bombak, talking before the break a bit about Father Mike and about his journey to the priesthood, his foray into digital evangelization. And that kind of naturally leads us to one of the things we mentioned several times, the Jesus Prayer 33. Some people might be familiar with that. I know I've encountered it. I haven't been able to take part, but I'm kind of familiar with it. But for those that aren't, what is it?
Yeah, so Jesus Prayer 33 is it is a prayer challenge. So it is a program that is designed secretly. I'll give you the secret, to the program, is there to inspire the practice of a prayer rule. That's what it's basically meant to do. It's a rule. It's a program designed to challenge people within a group setting to make the Jesus prayer part of their daily life, essentially. And so it's 40 people. We used to keep the cohorts during the pandemic, when we were online, we had a number of people. They were very, very hungry for interaction, for, prayer support, those sorts of things. So we had cohorts of 40 people, and we capped it at 40. We still had waiting lists after that because people really, really did want this. We wanted to keep it sort of small enough to facilitate conversation. So our motto is kind of like 40 people, 40 days, 33 Jesus prayers a day. So the core of the program is to commit to praying 33 Jesus prayers a day. But there are 5 catechetical videos that accompany the program. It's over 40 days. So there's one video a week that sort of introduces a different spiritual concept, and then has an extra challenge. So there's extra challenges on top of the 33 Jesus prayers a day, and also extra resources. So I point some of our participants to, podcasts or books or little internet snippets that can sort of help, foster a love for this prayer and also kind of deepen it practice-wise.
And how did you come up with the idea? Where did the idea for a program like this start?
So this is kind of a real God moment, because it was not my idea at all. So that's firstly, it was my wife's idea. So most of the time when that happens, I can tell, this is
we're back to the spouses, right? Back to the
Exactly.
wives being the real ones, right?
That's right. So she participated in this challenge where she bought a wool dress of all things. Okay, so she bought this wool dress, and the challenge was, if she can wear that dress for 100 days, not without washing it, obviously she could wash it and put it back on or whatever. If she could wear that dress for 100 consecutive days, she would get as a reward another wool dress from this company. And so she had to take pictures of herself with this wool dress and put it up so that, so that company gets extra advertising or whatever.
Right.
And also to kind of prove that I'm following through with this challenge to sort of show how rugged this wool dress is. And I was in the process of making chotkis. So I make those, the 33 wrist chotki, not chotkis. And my wife said to me, you should make some sort of a prayer challenge, and at the end of the time, you could give them a chotki. And that was it. That's how that whole thing came about. I said, oh, that's a great idea. Let's set a bar and then work it out. And I'm a teacher, so as I mentioned, my brain all of a sudden sort of automatically goes to planning lessons and making a pedagogy and a scope and a sequence. And, what do I want them to learn by the end of this? And so I overlaid, some themes onto that. And that's essentially how it worked. So at the beginning, I was making, if we had 40 people in these cohorts, I split it with my friend, Father Michailo, who's a co-creator of this program. Father Michailo Zorovich is in New Westminster. We still run these programs together whenever we can. But he taught me how to make these chotkis, and so I said to him, "Listen, I'll make half if you make half." So we were making 20 chotkis at the beginning here, because everyone gets a chotki at the end of the 33. This is the 40 days, right? So, and then I had to kind of expand it and teach some other people how to make these things so that we could, not completely kill our fingers by the time Pascha rolls around. So it was, that's sort of how it came about.
That's a good problem to have, right? Too many chotkis
It
to
is.
make.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
And now I've seen that part of it as well, though, in addition to these lessons, right, was kind of the social media aspect to it, right? There's a Facebook group that's part of that. Could you explain how that sort of adds to it, or why that's an important component, I guess, of the experience?
Yeah. So we started off with Facebook because it was free, and it was it provided sort of the free platform that we could go off of. Later on, as people started to donate to this project, we were able to get a domain name and an actual website that hosts it now, which is wonderful. So on that website, we have the videos hosted, so they're easily accessible. We can send out emails from that platform as well that are sort of scheduled. So if you've got a cohort that starts on, they're going to meet on a Thursday, let's say, well, then we can make sure the video gets sent out the Saturday before, and they've got it right away. Part of the program also is is meeting in person if possible, but over Zoom also works. So one of the ways that social media has really helped is we're running it in person here now at the parish, but we've got people who want to participate from all sorts of other places. Well, they can join us through Zoom, right? So we can have that. We have the ability now to broaden that meeting area. And the other thing too is that we have part of the program as one of the extra challenges is to invite people to write a little reflection on our message board about it. So it really is, it can be a little bit of a pinch for people that don't want to, go out there and write something. But I always found that when you've got to write something down, it really helps to sort of clarify your thinking. And it also kind of, it's a little bit more of a buy-in that way. So the nice thing about the social media is that we now have the ability where people will, on the message board, share their reflection for the week, and other participants can comment and say, oh yeah, I noticed the same thing, or I also have a question about that, or, there's some interaction that way, even before the in-person meeting. And so it really contributes to the conversation that way.
And I noticed also that on top of the 33 challenge, that now it's there's been an additional challenge, the Jesus Prayer 100, for those who've already completed the 33. Could you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we found, Father, that these the people that came out of 33 really wanted something more afterwards. And truth be told, 33 Jesus prayers, it's just a common goal to reach. The 33 is not the important part. The important part is that we're doing it together, right? So I always tell everyone, listen, don't be daunted by the 100. Like, the hardest part is establishing the routine of the prayer rule, the number of Jesus prayers that you pray. You can add hundreds afterwards, and it'll be way easier than trying to establish the rule itself. And people found that was the case. So anyway, they really wanted something more, and so we did the same thing, Jesus Prayer 100, but instead of the 5 catechetical videos that kind of introduced Eastern Christian spirituality, which is what the 33 does. Like, it starts from what is the Jesus Prayer, and it ends with a basic introduction to spiritual warfare with the 8 evil thoughts and the virtues. But this one, 100, is based on the famous book, The Way of the Pilgrim. And so it has 4 narratives in that book. So we take one of the narratives per week, and then there's a special guest lecture from Dr. Subdeacon Brian Butcher out of the he now teaches at McGill. Yeah, so he did a special guest lecture on the essence and energies distinction, just to show us what the top of the mountain looks like. But so we had a wonderful response for that. And originally I didn't, I could promise people, the carrot at the end of the 33 is, hey, you get your own wrist chotki, and people love that. And they said, well, do we get, 100 not chotki this time? And I said, well, I can't tie those. I'm not going to, but I've got a group of wonderful people here at St. Stephen's who have taken that up and who have learned how to tie the 100s. And so, yeah, they've been providing those, which has been a real joy.
Wow.
So, yeah, so that kind of was an organic development. People loved it enough that they wanted to do something more that way. And The Way of the Pilgrim is a beautiful book, so we have that comes through. And now actually, the people they want to learn how to tie the chotkis. I've taught of just a few people about how to do that. There's a real spirituality that goes behind that, though. It's not just like I always tell people, it's not a friendship bracelet.
It's not just knitting or crocheting.
Yeah,
right?
That's right. It's not just a craft. It's a real discipline. So we're in the works. We've got Jesus Prayer 300, which is basically, it's going to be a retreat where we show them how to make the knots and the significance of the knots and the discipline of tying the knots, and then also how to run the programs themselves, and a little bit of an introduction to the philokalia, because that's always the I don't want to say the danger, because it's a good thing, right? But the propensity of people coming out of the 100 after reading The Way of the Pilgrim is, I want to read the philokalia now, and
Right.
there's a little bit of sort of spiritual preparatory work to getting the most out of reading the philokalia if you're going to attempt it. Like it's hard to just jump into that collection that way. So a little bit of an introduction is included in 300. At least that's what's on the drawing board. So
Wow, fantastic. Yeah, for those who haven't read The Way of the Pilgrim, you should. But it is sort of like one big ad for the Philokalia in a lot of ways.
That's right. That's exactly it. Yeah.
So you mentioned a little bit about the making of chutki and the tying the knots and everything. But for those who maybe aren't familiar a little bit with the kind of the spirituality and the symbolism of something that looks as simple as just a knot, would you mind talking a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are different ways of doing it. Like there's the 4-string tradition and the 2-string tradition. I use the 4-string tradition. Just because I'm familiar with it. The 2-string tradition is also wonderful. But the significance of the knot is that it includes within it the cross. So there's a way that there are sort of 8 intersecting little crosses within it. And then also when you tie the knot itself, there's a little cross that you can discern as you tighten the knot itself. And so there's a triple blessing that goes into those knots in sort of 3 little stages of the tying of each of those knots. So there's the Trinitarian aspect of that. And as you're praying it, you are focused on prayer. You're focused on keeping your mind still and praying through the making of these knots. The importance of the cross is essential, though, because the story goes that the monks wanted to be able to keep track of their prayers, and one of the monks figured out, well, I'm going to tie these knots into a string, and it's going to make it easier for me to keep track, And as he slept, the devil came and untied them all, And so he. He was shown by an angel how to tie a specific knot that had the cross in it. And, why the cross? Because the cross is the one thing that the evil one cannot undo. It's the one thing that the evil one cannot, even understand. He looked to the world as though he had defeated, the Son of God. And through that implement of death, life comes into the world. And so we have that, in a very, incarnational type of way in the chotki with those knots. So it's a real joy to tie them, and it's its own special spiritual discipline. It's a real joy.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So for our listeners today, obviously not all of them live in Calgary. Not all of them even would be savvy enough to get on the computer and join the 33 challenge that way necessarily, or they might just feel they don't have the time to get involved in that particular way. But for those who couldn't get involved, what I'm trying to get at is for those who couldn't get involved in the specific 33 challenge, um, is there any sort of kind of general advice you could give them about adding the Jesus prayer to their regular lives, to their regular prayer life?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Jesus prayer really is a prayer that teaches the Jesus prayer, I guess is the best way to put it. The Nike principle, just do it, just do it. You're going to experience, the spiritual grace of making the time commitment to just be with the Lord. And that's what the Jesus prayer is. It's essentially being still, being one person in one place at one time, being a unified, integrated person before the Lord. And we live in a world that pulls us apart. We're experts at. I'm talking to someone on the other side of the world right now, essentially, right? We have the ability to be in multiple places at one time. The Jesus prayer is something that's going to collect you, to put you back together and to put you in the presence of the Lord. And it's worth the struggle, but the struggle begins by being consistent. It's the same thing as anything else. If you're willing to be consistent about the Jesus prayer, that's the hardest part. The heaviest lifting is the consistency, and it will start to just work its way into your life. It's a beautiful thing. There are two ways of praying it. Like you can pray it in the moment, and that's a beautiful thing too. When in times of temptation or times of adversity, or even when you're feeling thankful for what the Lord has done in your life. There's all sorts of moments in the day where you can pray the Jesus prayer, but those flow out of the formal way of praying it, which is to make a specific time and a specific place and a specific routine of praying the prayer. And once that kind of gets in your heart, then you'll find that its spontaneous form comes easier and easier. So it just kind of wells up in you that way. So
now,
practically speaking, then a consistent time and a consistent place. And I always encourage people, you don't have to shoot for hundreds and hundreds of these things at the very beginning. You just have to make it consistent. So, do 33 Jesus prayers while sitting in your prayer corner at, 7 a.m. every morning. Or, if you're a night person, do it before bed, or however it's going to work for you. Set it up for success, but shoot for daily consistency.
Like you said, the hardest part is getting that rhythm down, right? It doesn't matter whether it's 33 or 100, 200, 500, right? The hardest part is getting started in the first part.
That's exactly it. That is exactly it.
So, Father, for those people listening right now who might be in your area or might be interested, for example, in reading more about the Jesus Prayer 33 Challenge, or maybe implementing something similar in their parishes even, where can they go to find out more?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So the Jesus Prayer 33 and 100 was always designed to be something that is shared for free and accessible by whoever would like to use it that way. So we have a website, www.jesusprayer33.com or .ca. Both of those domains will go to the same place. And on there, you have the ability to sign up for a cohort. So pastors, if you would like to run Jesus Prayer 33 in your parish, I am more than happy to explain how to do it, to ask our web mistress to either schedule it on your behalf after we've registered your people, or I can provide you with a link that'll allow you to schedule it however you would like. But the content and the progression, it's all there for you. So that's the first thing. Or if there's someone in your parish, maybe you don't want to run it yourself as the pastor, because I know what the life of a pastor looks like. But if you have, parish leaders, it really, honestly, if there are questions that the parish leaders can't answer, like theological ones, they can always come to you afterwards and say, yeah, the things that we, really couldn't answer were the following, but the teaching itself is all delivered through video anyway. So it's a very easily lay-led program if people would like. So that invitation is there. So if you go to the website, we've got a contact email there, and we can answer any questions like that. Barring that, if there's the desire to learn more about the Jesus Prayer, there's a great sort of little short introductory book called Living the Jesus Prayer. And it's by Irma, and I don't actually know what. I'm just going to duck away from my computer for one quick sec here.
Yeah.
Grab it. There we go. So it's a little book called Living the Jesus Prayer by Irma Zaleski, Zaleski. And it's really, really short, and it just gives a little introduction. There's no sort of deficit of material on the Jesus Prayer, though, from all sorts of different sites. I don't recommend jumping right into the Philokalia. I think that there's all sorts of it's technical language. Patristic literature is hard to just up and get into. There are all sorts of popularizing books that way. There's a lot of really good stuff from Ancient Faith Radio on the Jesus Prayer. Father Maxim Lasac is someone who is excellent. I think he's got a podcast called The Law of the Spirit or something similar to that. He's got a great sort of couple podcasts about the Jesus Prayer there as an introduction as well. So there's all sorts of good stuff that way.
Well, fantastic. I think you've hopefully given our listeners a lot of resources that they can incorporate the Jesus Prayer into their lives, and maybe even take part in that challenge.
Yeah, more than welcome. I'd love to. If you're in Calgary, you can participate in person. But if we've got a cohort where we can incorporate with Zoom, that's always a possibility too. So, please God.
Well, once again, thank you so much, Father Michael, for taking the time to come on with us today. And you can check out Musings with Father Mike on YouTube. You can visit JesusPrayer33.com for the specific Jesus Prayer 33 things. Any other websites or ways to connect that I'm missing?
No, I think that's those are the big ones. Yeah.
All right. Well, once again, thank you, Father Michael, for joining us today. And thank you, listeners, for listening today here on God With Us Live. It's always a pleasure to bring you these little looks at things going on in our beautiful Eastern Catholic churches and ways to hopefully increase your prayer life and help you grow closer to God, especially as we approach this season of Great Lent, the Great Fast, and we'll be praying for you, and hopefully this is a good introduction. If you've been kind of on the fence about incorporating the Jesus Prayer into your prayer life, hopefully Father Michael has given you some good tips and maybe even a challenge to take up. So thank you once again for listening today on God With Us Live. God bless.
For this week's episode of God With Us Live. Make sure to tell a friend or two about us and subscribe in your favorite podcast app so you never miss an episode. Don't forget to follow God With Us online on Facebook and Instagram for even more great content about the Eastern Catholic Churches. And don't forget to check out all the other great Eastern Catholic podcasts at godwithusradio.org, where faith meets life. God With Us Live is a production of God With Us Radio, hosted, produced, and edited by Nick Modelski. Send us a message at info@godwithusradio.org.